What if I told you that Utah English came from England? Well, you'd say, well, duh. The entire U.S. got its English language from the Brits. What I mean is this. Utah got a late influx of British immigrants that the rest of the country didn't. This map shows the percentage of Americans in 1910 who were born in Britain, and Utah got more than its share compared to the rest of the U.S. But if we look back just a few more decades, we find a huge Utah-British connection. Between 1847 and 1900, it's estimated that over 100,000 British immigrants made their way to Utah. Now, 2 years later, in 1850, 15% of the Utah population consisted of foreign-born English speakers. By 1877, half of the 140,000 people residing in what would become the state of Utah were of British origin. Now, this includes the English-born and their descendants. So, what characteristics of Utah dialect may be the result of this British invasion? Well, case number one. Consider the word pants, which in the U.S. means this, but in the U.K. pants means this, underpants. So to distinguish what is worn underneath and on top, the British call the outerwear trousers, a term that reminds me of what my grandfather called them, along with breeches. A search of the word trousers shows this. Southern Utah appears to have conserved the British term trousers more than the rest of the U.S. This map shows the frequency of the word trousers as used in tweets. It looks like trousers has been passed down from the Utah's British ancestors and retained in the more conservative rural parts of the state. Case number two, Hurricane Utah, which native Hurricanites call hurricane, not hurricane. Now, this is a source of great amusement to outsiders who believe that their quaint pronunciation is some kind of sloppy small-town degradation of the supposedly true hurricane. But we can blow that theory out of the water. You see, hurricane is merely a British pronunciation kept alive in a small town in the Utah desert. Case number three, culinary water. While most people distinguish between potable and non-potable water, Utahns use the term culinary water for the drinkable kind. It turns out that this was the common term in Britain in the 19th century, but it's since fallen out of use there. But the British immigrants to the state firmly implanted it in Utah, and here it remains. Case 4. Back in the 70s, Robert Plant, the lead singer of Led Zeppelin, crooned these words. I can hear it calling me the way it used to do. Does the do in used to do strike you as odd? Now, how about in these sentences? At least I haven't heard the complaints that I used to do. I think they could have done. Do you want a hand, babe? I might do. Now, most Americans would prefer these sentences without the do and done. At least I haven't heard the complaints that I used to. I think they could have. Do you want a hand, babe? I might. The do is one of those quirks that the Brits use much more than the Yanks. Kind of like how Americans convalesce in the hospital while the British do it in hospital. I'm not saying, however, that you'll never hear that kind of do in the United States. For example, Hank Williams saying, why don't you love me the way you used to do? Now, some researchers notice the use of do and done in sentences like these in Utah. I must admit, I've heard them fall off the lips of my parents and grandparents, but most younger Utahns find I could have done a little odd. While the do's and dones may have been a feature of Utah English in the past, they seem to be going the way of gal and groovy. The question, though, is whether they were brought to Utah by the British immigrants. To answer this question, I needed samples of speech from 19th and 20th century Utahns, or immigrants, who were born in the U.S., England, or elsewhere. I found the perfect data set in the discourses of the General Conferences of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that were given between 1851 and 2020. These are available in easily searchable format on the internet thanks to Mark Davies. With the help of my trusted research assistant, Jessica Brown, we searched for cases of pro-predicate do, as it's called. These do's and dones take place of part of a sentence. The do and I used to do replaces drink lots of tab. So we looked at speakers from England, other places, and from Utah, and this is what we found. The Englishmen born between 1797 and 1846 used the do construction much more than everyone else, and maybe that was enough to get pro-predicate do moving in the state. However, Utah-born and Utah residents born elsewhere between 1847 and 1867 actually outdoed the English immigrants. This, along with the fact that the use of pro-predicate do didn't become prevalent in England until the early 20th century, makes me a bit suspicious that maybe it wasn't the English who were responsible for bringing it to the state.